Race, Life, Death, Identity, Tragedy, and Good Faith by Naomi Zach by Johanna Simonson. Zach's main focus in this article revolves around the idea, conception, and effects of biological race. The point she begins the article with demonstrates her concern for the term biological race and how she thinks that there's nothing biological about it. No genes or chromosomal markers for any of the designated racial groups have been identified. There also are no verified correlations between so-called racial biological traits and any cultural traits. The modern conception of race emerged to rationalize immoral acts of oppression in relation to human rights. Zach refers to the slave trade and uses it as an example of how white people use the concept of race to justify their reasoning for enslaving African Americans so that their crimes would not be recognized as criminal acts. Death comes to all of us regardless of race. Zach believes that for oneself, death is a simple catastrophe and a natural order of things, but for an outsider, it may seem like a tragedy. To view one's life as a tragedy requires an imagined distance from that life and from oneself, which is a form of deception. In imagining oneself at that distance, the real self can still act and is deprived of its power to act because it has been imagined into the role of a spectator. The distance one creates is in bad faith because you are pretending that you are a spectator of your life and that you are not participating, which is the end of your agency. Since death is a natural order of things, it is better to accept one's fate because then death cannot be seen as a tragedy. The acceptance of racial identification as a part of one's identity has the capacity to transform one's death from a catastrophe into a tragedy because racial identification is third-person description with built-in distance from a self. If one accepts the concept of race and identifies themselves as a part of a racial group, then they are living life as a stereotype and how society defines them. Race is not in the body, but in the minds of those who perform racial identifications. Race is a concept created in the minds of people to identify others and put them at a disadvantage by not being white. Accepting one's traditional culture and choosing to ignore the views of others based on racial identification is the correct path for the world to endeavor to begin to accept every individual and overlook the past conceptions of race. This article brings up and addresses the problem with the concept of biological race and how it affects people's identities. I believe Naomi Zach is trying to persuade the world to leave the concept of race in the past, considering all of the negative oppressed acts it justified and the continual stereotypes it encourages. However, she does not want the racialized people to abandon their culture due to the misconceptions and discriminatory ideas about them. Her strong opinions on the idea of viewing one's death as a tragedy relates to viewing your life as a spectator, which is bad faith. She believes that in order for nature to be in order and to be in good faith, people must accept fate, that we all must die, and to embrace death as a participant, and then our death can be seen as a simple catastrophe. This article concludes that Americans are quick to judge, and we tend to let the preconceived ideas of others influence our opinions, and to Naomi Zach, this is a negative habit that must be changed.